Hello friends, welcome to my little corner on the interwebs. My name's Kathlena and I'm autistic with a heavy dash of ADHD. This is part 2 of my ASD evaluation. If you missed part 1, be sure to hop over and watch that before watching this one, just because it'll make this video make a whole lot more sense. I'll be sure to link it down below. So after I left my first full assessment appointment, I was feeling defeated. I was having imposter syndrome and just really not quite sure how to process what I was experiencing and what I was feeling. And going into my second and final assessment appointment, I wasn't feeling much better. Before arriving, so there was a week in between my first appointment and my second appointment for the actual assessment, and in that week I was sent more questionnaires to do at home, and my husband was also sent some questionnaires to report on his experiences with me. And from what I understand, this is a pretty common thing for them to do, to reach out, for doctors to do, to reach out to family members. Usually they'll try parents, but that's not always an option. And my husband and I have known each other and been together for 10 years, so he was a pretty good source to go to. Arriving to my second appointment, I walk in, and again, the first thing that I was asked to do was to sit down and take another fairly lengthy questionnaire, not nearly as lengthy as the first one. And this one actually seemed to be focused towards ASD and kind of measuring what I thought was maybe like my functionality. So I think this was kind of to assess where I fell on the spectrum in terms of being high functioning or low functioning, or higher needs and lower needs. The questions were grouped into sections that were titled things like work or social or finances. And the questions were pretty basic, like, do you look both ways before crossing the street? Or are you able to cook yourself nourishing meals? Or do you balance your checkbook every month? Which I don't. I need to. So after that questionnaire, we went ahead and moved into the second and final part of the IQ. So we started with arithmetic, and I was provided a word-based math problem that was spoken to me and could only be spoken to me one time, and I was not allowed to write anything down, and I had to solve it in my head. Now, my working memory is awful. So I was only really able to get through probably 3 or 4 of those math problems because it felt like a paragraph was being spoken to me, and I couldn't hold on to everything that I needed to be able to efficiently solve the puzzle in my head without being able to write it down. It was also during this point in the assessment that the doctor that I was working with did bring up the possibility of dyslexia. And to be honest, I've always suspected that or really known without being diagnosed, I know that I'm dyslexic, but it felt really weird and kind of uncomfortable and triggering to have that said, like, as my IQ is being evaluated. After the arithmetic portion of the IQ test, the next section was history and historical figures. This part was kind of frustrating because I actually know quite a bit about history, but my working memory and being able to quickly pull information from my brain and put it into spoken sentences can be challenging, and IQ tests are timed, so I'm not allowed that time to be able to sit and think and work through and find the actual answer. The last little bit of the IQ test was a written section, and I was given a series of shapes, and I was asked to basically copy down as many as I could within a certain time period. And that was it for the IQ portion, and I was very relieved to move along and finish the assessment. So the last little bit of the assessment was interview style, where basically the psychologist asked me questions about my work life, my social life, my childhood experiences. I was then provided a laminated, like, cartoon illustration of what was basically a bunch of cartoon character people. It looked like on an island, like a resort or something, playing, swimming, jet skiing, like there was just so much going on. And he asked me to tell him what I saw, so I told him what I saw. He didn't really ask, the only follow-up question he asked was if I thought that they looked happy, and they did. I was then handed another laminated cartoon, like same style cartoon picture, and this one was very clearly the United States in cartoon form, and each state had like what that state was most known for. So like California had the Hollywood sign there, New York had the Statue of Liberty, you kind of get my drift. And with that one, he asked me what I saw, and then he, I think, was trying to engage in conversation and was asking me if I had ever traveled before, or if I wanted to travel, where would I go? But again, I don't know exactly what that was assessing, like whether or not I'm able to, you know, keep up with a conversation that I'm not very interested in. And that was it. Walking out of that appointment, I did feel a sense of relief just to have it done. I didn't know where I stood. I didn't know if I was going to be diagnosed. I didn't know if he would see what I was seeing, and I didn't really care. I was glad that it was done. I trusted him and his professional opinion. I wanted a diagnosis because for me, it would just explain so much. But I also knew that regardless of whether or not I received the diagnosis of ASD, this whole process had helped me learn so much about myself, and I knew that I definitely was somewhere on the neurodiverse spectrum. And so I took a deep breath and knew that whatever was going to happen was going to happen. So 2 weeks later, I walked into my final appointment, sat on the brown leather couch. I have to admit I was quite disconnected at this point in time because I just didn't know what to expect. And the psychologist comes in, sits down, and pretty quickly starts the appointment with, "So I'm diagnosing you with ASD level 1, but I'm sure you're not very surprised about that." And my response was, I had no idea what to expect. I felt so, even though he walked me through and I like understood the process, I didn't know where I stood on the process. It was so hard for me to be able to gauge whether I was doing well or whether I wasn't doing well and what that would even look like. After he told me that, he handed me a 15-page report that we then went through over the next hour, and he walked me through everything that I did and what led up to that diagnosis, which I thought was pretty cool. I have this whole report that I was able to go home and read about and again, understand myself a little bit better. I left that appointment feeling validated. I left that appointment feeling seen, feeling heard, and finally having confirmation that I'm not crazy, that I'm not lazy, that my brain is just wired differently. And that knowledge is fucking power. Excuse my French. So that wraps up part 2 of my adult ASD assessment process. I hope that you enjoyed it, maybe learned a little bit of something. If you are watching this and you've gone through this process as an adult, I'm really curious to hear about your experience and if it differed from mine. So be sure to let me know in the comments. I'll see you guys in the next video.